Salem, Massachusetts. The name itself conjures images of the 1600s, where Puritans were pitted against one another as accusations and hysteria swept over the town. But what if I told you that Salem was not only host to the craziness of the witch trials, but was also home to what many believed to be demonic possession? A place where modern medicine and psychiatry hadn't yet come to grips with the all-too-real frailties of the human mind. A place where mental illness sent some to the hangman's hill, not just those accused of being witches. Today we investigate the hauntings of the Samuel Pickman house, a house that has seen more than its fair share of death and suffering, both in legend and reality. So if you're curious, let's take a walk through history. Gloomy, dark, and witchy are some of the words that come to mind when describing the historical architecture in Salem, Massachusetts. The Pickman House is no exception. Only a few feet away from the Peabody Essex Museum, the house stands in all its creepy colonial glory. Its gray wooden exterior, combined with diamond-paned windows and a large, faded scarlet door, emit an eerie, spine-chilling feel. The house was first owned by Samuel Pickman. Pickman was a sailor, much like the majority of Salem's population in his time. Authors Bryant and Carolyn Tolles, in their book Architecture in Salem, speculate that the property was built by Samuel's father, Nathaniel Pickman, in 1655. Nestled next to the highly trafficked Charter Street Cemetery, also known as the Old Burying Point Cemetery, tour groups pass through this historic building, and passers-by peek through its windows. And the Salem Witch Trial Memorial was built behind the Pickman House in 1992, where markers were placed to commemorate the many executed during the Salem witch hysteria. With a reputation for being one of the oldest buildings in Salem, it's no wonder the Pickman House is thought to be incredibly haunted. For centuries, people have lived in this home, bringing with them powerful energies that linger within its walls. The origins of the hauntings have been attributed to gruesome deaths that occurred there. These legends have been passed down through generations as part of local folklore. Among these hair-raising tales is a gruesome story said to have taken place in the 18th century. According to legend, a family of 3 had moved into the home, a husband, wife, and 7-year-old daughter. Shortly after settling in, for some reason, the man's mental health began to fail until he reached the point of insanity. He claimed that he could see and hear demons, and in his struggle to fight the evil entities, he became increasingly irritable. Violent outbursts would horrify his family, each one more jarring than the one before. One day during a maniacal episode, he chained his daughter in the attic, depriving her of all the comforts she once enjoyed, vowing she would spend the rest of her life locked away. And with each passing day, starving, alone, and frightened, the girl waited for death to release her from her confinement. His wife was terrified of her husband, but putting her fears aside, she begged him to release their child. Her pleas had no effect on the already deranged man. Eventually, irritated by her presence, he gathered some rope and tied his wife to a tree in the yard. He then made his way to the kitchen, where he began to heat a large block of wax. Once the wax had come to a boil, he grabbed the cast iron pot and poured it over his restrained wife's head. She screamed and howled in agony for what would seem like an eternity, dying a slow, excruciating death. Once his wife's blood-curdling screams had become drowned by the hardened wax, he went back inside the house and ended his life. Although there were 3 simultaneous violent deaths in the house, the spirit of the famished girl is the one seen most often. Visitors have captured photos of what looks to be a young girl staring out the second-floor window, and first-hand accounts of the girl's full-bodied apparition have also been reported. Others claim the Samuel Pickman house is home to a demonic entity that manifests in photos taken through the 17th century windows. And even employees of the museum across the street claim to have heard disembodied voices at night, particularly voices that sound like children. Now, whether the horror story is true or not, one actual case from the 17th century has some striking similarities to the tall tale and an equally shocking ending. Puritan woman Dorothy Talby went from being a respectable member of Salem's church to a despondent and increasingly violent murderess. Her husband complained of her bizarre behavior to Salem authorities, who sentenced her in 1673 to be chained to a post for frequently laying hands on her husband to the danger of his life. Governor John Winthrop wrote about Talby's mental behavioral maladies, including falling into difference with her husband, a host of melancholy or spiritual delusions, threats to kill her husband, and ultimately the crime of infanticide. Talby was hanged in December of 1638 for killing her 3-year-old daughter, whom she named Difficult. Talby broke her daughter's neck on a cold night that October. According to her testimony, God had told her to murder her daughter. Winthrop believes Satan had possessed Talby. Modern-day therapists believe she suffered from a severe case of postpartum depression. At her trial, Talby refused to speak until Winthrop threatened to pile stones on her chest, the same method used on Giles Corey to try and coerce a confession. During her execution, she fought to the bitter end. With the noose around her neck, she ripped the cloth from around her head and put it under the noose to ease the pain. And she also tried to grab the ladder. And eventually she succumbed. Demonic possession? Perhaps. Mental instability? Probably. In both the Talby murder and the alleged Pickman House horror story, the negative energy associated with each case has ties to unspeakable acts of violence. And although in today's society we have a better understanding of mental health issues, Puritans believed evil was present and active in Salem, and the cause of almost all the unspeakable horrors that occurred, especially those that occurred at the Samuel Pickman house. Thanks for watching, folks. If you enjoyed the video, please take a second to like and subscribe, and if you would leave a comment, I would love to hear from you. Also, we have links to our Patreon and our merchandise store and our social media in the description below. And we will see you next time as we explore more curious history. Take care.